There we go.
Welcome to the September meeting of the Western Pennsylvania Mushroom Club. I'm Cecily Franklin. And before I introduce our guest speaker tonight, I have some important updates. First of all, our latest newsletter, the September-October newsletter, went out to all members, either by US mail or email by September the 1st. It's also available on our website, so make sure you check it out. It's got lots of news, photographs, and even a book review. And now I'm happy to announce some new committee chairs. Chris Morosky is going to become our new membership chair, replacing Jim Wasik. And Brian Cass will be our new scholarship chair, replacing John Stewart. So thank you to both of them. Okay, since our last meeting, we've had some secret walks. We had one on September 5th at Townsend Park in Murraysville, Westmoreland County. And then last weekend, we started our traditional Gary Linkoff foray festivities. We had our traditional pre-foray walk at Cook Forest in Clarion County. And we also tried to get our traditional group shot. Now with all these masks, it's hard to tell who people are, but you can probably recognize Lamont. And then last weekend, we had 3 walks in North Park. We had one at Devil's Elbow with Fluff Burger. And she actually, one of her people found a fungus that she had never seen before. And I can't pronounce it, but the common name is spreading yellowtooth. And it's got these branching rhizomorphs. Then we had another walk in the swimming pool area with Richard Jacob. And here's Lamont wrestling a mushroom out of the ground. And then at the same time, we had a walk over at the Wyoming shelter led by Kara Coulter. On Saturday afternoon, I did an interview with Long Lit Woon, the author of The Way Through the Woods on Mushrooms in Mourning, and that's now available. Just go to our YouTube channel and type in WPMC Talks, and you'll see it there. It's a 30-minute interview. It was lots of fun. Okay, upcoming events. September 26th, we have a walk with Allegheny Land Trust at Wingfield Pines. That'll be with Lamont and Julie Travaglini. It actually sold out at one point, but they opened up some more slots. So try and get in on that. September 30th is the deadline to enter our photo contest. And then at our next meeting on October 20th, the results of the photo contest will be announced, and we will elect officers for next year. And then November 17 will be our last meeting of the year with member photos and annual awards. Okay, we do have one new ID button to report, and that is Cherie Charmello Andrews. In this picture, which was taken less than a year ago, she's holding up her 25 button. But since then, she's gotten a 50 and a 75 and just got approved for a 100. Okay, here's our membership report. At the end of last year, we had over 1,000 members. And as of this weekend, we are up to 822 for this year from 457 households. And just remember, if you are a member this year, you will automatically be renewed through next year at no cost. Okay, for next month's meeting, which will be October 20, we have 2 parts. First, Josh Doty, our photo contest judge, will report the results of our photo contest. And then we will also have an online poll at the members only Zoom meeting where we can vote for next year's officers. And the slate is President Stephen Buckland, Vice President Kara Coulter, Secretary Julie Travaglini, Treasurer Jared Delaney, and NAMA trustee Garrett Taylor. Now, tonight's speaker is Leon Shernoff, editor of Mushroom, the Journal of Wild Mushrooming, who will be speaking about fall mushrooms. So let me read you his bio. Leon Shernoff is currently in his 17th year as editor of the internationally distributed magazine Mushroom, the Journal of Wild Mushrooming. In addition to Mushroom, the Journal, his columns on wild mushrooms have appeared in the Wild Foods Network, Backwoods Home Magazine, and Mycophile, the newsletter of the North American Mycological Association. A former president of the Illinois Mycological Association, Leon has given mushroom talks and identified mushrooms for forays in California, Connecticut, Illinois, Maine, Minnesota, Missouri, New York, Oregon, and Washington. Fungi that Leon has collected are now part of the permanent collection of the Field Museum in Chicago and the New York Botanical Gardens. Autumn is the peak season for mushrooms, and Leon will share his knowledge of the mushrooms of our eastern forests and the role that fungi play in our ecosystems. So at this point, I'd like to pause, and I can't figure out how to do that. Oh, here we go. Pause. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Cecily. It's good to be here. And so you you told me to speak about fall edibles, and then you said that all of a sudden there's this ecosystem stuff. But that will happen also. So I thought what I'd do is go for some mushrooms that most of us probably know, but try and talk about them in a little bit more depth than we usually get. And so I'm actually going to present two taxa in kind of some detail, and I'm going to like quiz you on them. So we'll see what happens there. And two other taxa I'll just deal with more briefly. So the first mushroom I thought I'd talk about is hen of the woods, which is, you know, something that everybody loves. And I thought I would use, why is this sharing the wrong thing? Here we go. That looks like it's sharing the right thing, hopefully. Yes. Okay, so we have hen of the woods. Wonderful fall edible, something we all love to find. It's even, you know, it's best when you can find a bunch of them around the same tree. These are so standard out here that often we don't realize that they only grow west of the Rockies, east of the Rockies, excuse me. So one time we had, in the Illinois Club, we had a visiting mycologist from Oregon, and we're like, let's take you out to find hen of the woods. And my mushrooming buddy, John Dank, had a spot, and there were all these oak trees around the parking lot, and some of them had just been cut down. So we figured the hens would be fruiting. So we parked. There was a stump right in front of the car. There was a hen of the woods on each cardinal direction of the stump, north, south, east, and west. And each of them filled half a shopping bag. So we filled 2 shopping bags, you know, 4 feet from the car. And the visiting mycologist said, wow, this is the most efficient mushroom hunting I've ever seen in my life. So what makes a hen of the woods? We have these nice, roughly brown fronds everywhere. Cecily, you asked me what happens when you, why do we sometimes find white hen of the woods, like this photo up here? And I will say this site is which I'm going to be using for this section of the talk, is by Gary Emberger. And he used to be a mycologist at Messiah College, not too far from you in Pennsylvania. And he did a site that's just mushrooms that grow on wood. So if you have a wood inhabiting mushroom that you're interested in, you can Google Messiah and the name of the mushroom, and you'll come up with Gary's site, and all the descriptions have lots of different pictures like you're seeing here, and kind of a detailed description, more or less. But it's good for getting not just one picture and off we go, the way the field guides are mostly. So Cecily, you asked me, why do we get these white specimens of hen of the woods? And not to rule out some very strange, unique thing happening on the one you found, but a lot of it happens because, most of the time it happens because they are not in the sunlight, which is what Gary has noted here. So, although a lot of us start out thinking of mushrooms as mushrooms don't move. So when we start out, we think of them as being more like plants. But here, let me just stop the share for the moment, because I'm talking a lot and gesturing and making funny faces. So we tend to think of mushrooms as being more like plants than animals. But biologically, there are two super kingdoms. There's animals and fungi that are together, and then there's plants and chromista, which are like brown seaweed and tomato blight and things like that. So the animals and fungi, we have some very fundamental biological features, and especially biochemical ones, because in other ways we've changed a lot from fungi. But one of the things that we still both have are melanin, our skin pigment, and it's also the skin pigment in mushrooms like hen of the woods, portobellos, shiitakes. The brown in all of those mushrooms is melanin, and it's produced in response to sunlight, which is why those white button mushrooms, which they want to be pure white, which is why those are traditionally grown underground. And mushrooms like us tan. If you expose them to sunlight, they produce more melanin, and they also produce vitamin D. So if you want your mushrooms to have more vitamin D, leave them in the window a little day or so, and they'll be more nutritious in that respect. There was a whole study done with chanterelles, and I don't forget the numbers, but you leave your chanterelles in the window and their vitamin D goes up, because they don't get too much sunlight in the actual forest. So when you have hen of the woods and it's white, I've actually found one where it was growing inside a fallen tree. So there was this log on the ground, there was this hollow at the end of the log, and there was a hen of the woods growing there, and about half of it was sticking out, and it was nice and dark brown the way you expect them to be, but the part that was inside the stump was still white. So most of the time when you find a white hen of the woods, it's just because it hasn't been getting sunlight. And conversely, if you find something that looks like a white hen of the woods that's inside, growing in a shady spot, not to be scared of it. It's just a regular hen of the woods that hasn't gotten out much. And another thing I wanted to just mention briefly is we have a lot of lookalikes for hen of the woods, which I'm going to go over now. And I think this has led to a sort of traditional set of cooking instructions that I don't think is very good. And I think that's because people have been collecting historically these other things. So you can see in a lot of books that you're supposed to cook hen of the woods for a long time because otherwise it's tough. And they recommend stewing it or like just boiling it forever. And that's just wrong, I'm going to say. Um, and what I'd like to, first of all, cook them in a pan with some sort of oil or butter, like most of your mushrooms. And then you have a mushroom, and if you want to put it in soup, just take that stuff and put it in a soup, or put it in, because it does kind of need to get that hot to break down the chitin that's in the cell walls in the hen of the woods. And it's, you don't cook it for any longer than any normal mushroom, and so on and so forth. Some of its lookalikes are really tough and really do need to be cooked, quote, forever, as one friend of mine said when I asked him, how the heck do you cook this thing? So I think there's been this confusion, and cooking hen of the woods like a regular mushroom, I think is just the way to go. You can put it in soup, you can put it on steak, you can add to whatever else you're doing at that point. But as your first line of attack, just cook it like anything else. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so what are our lookalikes for hen of the woods? And if you're lucky, polypore, which you can see, looking at them side by side, you can see how they're kind of similar looking, but you can also see how you really shouldn't mistake these. These are these very flat brown fronds. They're sort of growing in this way where they're just spreading out. This is Polyporus umbellatus. I'm just going to scroll up here. The umbrella polypore. And each of its fronds has a central stalk, you're seeing down here. And the stalks are fairly substantial, and they fork and have more, fronds on each one. They have the little umbo in the middle. They have a little, innie belly button. Whereas the Grifola, they're just flat and roughly white growing edge here. And there's definitely an outer edge on each of these fronds. Umbellatus, they're round. They don't have a front edge and a back edge, really. This is also edible and very good. So and it's a lot less common. So if you find it, it's a treat, and it's exciting, and it's also good. My father was on a bio blitz once at one of the local nature preserves, and he and a couple other people from the club were representing mushrooms. And on the first day of the bio blitz, this was like a 3-day weekend, they found one of these. They were all really excited. All the other experts for like birds and plants gathered around to try and see, oh, this rare thing was found. And then the next morning, when they were starting up again and all eating breakfast, the secretary of the club asked my dad how the mushroom was, and he said, oh, it was delicious. And all the birders and plant people just stared at them all, and the bug people were like, what did you ate that thing? And it was like, yep, we ate the rare thing. That's what we do. We're mushroomers. And this is also a fall mushroom. So, you know, so far you're good. Both mushrooms are edible. And again, I would cook it the same way, you know, just like a regular mushroom. There are two well-known lookalikes, and they are more of a summer mushroom. So that's one sort of clue. And they're both edible. You know, this is one of the nice thing about hens is the lookalikes are pretty much all edible also. And so the one that's most obviously not hen of the woods is Berkeley's polypore, which doesn't have those little individual fronds. It has these big, once it's mature, it has these big sort of circular fanning out fronds. It has these big old pores that get very irregular. When it gets older, the walls between the pores break down, and you end up with this maze-like underside to it. And like I said, it's a summer mushroom. Biologically, it's a russula that has adopted this weird tree parasite polypore growth style. It can be a little fuzzy on top. You're kind of seeing over here. And when it's young, it grows. You see these weird finger-like things coming up out of the ground. And in that stage, it's, you know, a fairly better edible. But when it gets this big, it's really, really tough. So if anyone has ever eaten it, then, you know, you really do. This is why you would need to boil it, to cook it for hours and hours. The more plausible thing that might happen is that you collect this thing. This is the blackening polypore, Meropolis sumsteini. It'll be in your book, most of your book says Meropolis giganteus, because it also gets really big. It will form rosettes. It will surround stumps. So its growth habitat and its, you know, frond style looks like a bit like the hen of the woods. But again, the fronds are bigger. They can be more yellowish. They, when it's fresh, when it's well hydrated, it'll turn black where it's bruised. Or sometimes just when it gets older, you'll find it'll just be this mass of blackened fronds. And here, this is just sort of darkening with age. It's turning black just because that's what happens when they get old. And especially when they're young and the fronds haven't gotten very big, it can look kind of like a hen. Now, if it's bruising black, then it's easy to tell apart. If it's not bruising black, then the way to tell it apart is the pore size, because I don't know. You can see the underside here just kind of looks smooth and almost velvety. The pores on this are really, really tiny. So whereas on Hen of the Woods, they're clearly visible and, you know, no problem to see it all. Here you have to look really closely. So that's sort of your ace in the hole way to tell them apart. And I've had people in the club, you know, we talk about this and, you know, where they post, oh, I found 3 hens, you know, and they talk about it being tough and so on and so forth. And I'm like, well, are the pores big enough to see? Or is it turning black at all? And it's like, yeah, it's really tiny pores. And okay, you just ate a Meropolis, and these are really, really tough. My introduction to them, oh, and the other thing is they taste like liver. Um, it's been a fairly good liver taste when I had them. My introduction to these was when I was just starting out, found a little thing that was just sort of a blobby growth on a stump, really tiny pores. It keyed out in Mushrooms Demystified as Miripolis, so me and my father ate it, and it was tasty, um, definitely reminiscent of liver. Um, but if you pick them when they actually have fronds, then they're really, really tough. And you really, really do have to, crock pot them or something. And this is the one where my friend in Southern Illinois said, I was like, he said he picks it at any age. And I'm like, how do you manage to eat this? And he said, I just cook it forever. And he would not uh, be more specific as to what constituted being forever. So these are the lookalikes for hen of the woods. They all are eating the heartwood of the tree that they're on, which, heartwood sounds like, oh my God, heartwood, oh, so sad. And they're called parasites because of this. But, when you, the way a tree grows, you have this cambium right under the bark, and that's kind of the only part of the trunk that's alive. And each year the cambium grows and turns into wood, and that's, your growth ring for that year. And, the cells with their tough cellulose lignin cell walls, that they die and form that next layer of the wood. So um, these fungi that eat the heartwood are not killing the tree. Eventually, there will be a big storm and it will fall over. Let me just find my picture of that process. I have some general info. Okay. Let me just talk. Because I don't know where that thing is. So when we're in primary school or grade school, I'll stop sharing. We get told that, plants are these wonderful, munificent beings that capture sunlight and the energy from sunlight, and they turn it into biological stuff that the rest of us can eat. And this starts off the food chain, and this is just sort of wonderful and automatic. But in fact, fungi are some of the very few organisms on Earth that can digest wood. And in fact, the period, sometimes, again, in these older textbooks, you'll see this spiel about how, oh, fungi, they digest the wood in the forest. So like if they weren't here, all the dead wood would pile up and everything would die, and this is so sad. But so first of all, this did happen at one point, and it happened a few eras before the dinosaurs, and it's called the Carboniferous era because all the dead plants really did pile up, and they got covered by other things and compressed and subjected to geological processes. And this is how we got our coal and our oil. So yeah, this did actually happen. And then at some point that roughly matches the end of this period on Earth, fungi developed the ability to digest wood, and um, all this, and the ecosystem as we now know it started. So yeah, this actually did happen. It wasn't, a, you know, life-ending event on Earth. And so let me start this thing up here. Okay, let me just do what Cecily just did. I am going to share a previous presentation, and we are going to start. So all sorts of fungi, all sorts of shapes. This is the magazine that I run that Cecily mentioned at the beginning, Mushroom, the Journal of Wild Mushrooming. You should all subscribe. It's at mushroomthejournal.com. Or if you just Google mushroom and journal, you'll get to it. Now, what I was just talking about, these are all nice pictures. Here we go. So when you've got something like hen of the woods that's been digesting the inside of your tree, the research that we know shows that the fungi can eat 90% of the center of the tree, and the tree will be standing up perfectly fine. But when you have a really big storm, they will blow down even at, less than 90% digested. And what you can see here is the inside is hollow. So that all was making some wonderful animal habitat while the tree was standing up. And there are all these white fungal mats all over the inside of the tree because the fungus was digesting this stuff and turning it into soil and turning it into a form that critters can actually eat. Right? So here's these fungal mats. And what's happening with them is, we've all seen the slugs. We got one down at the bottom here. They're all over the mycelium here inside the tree. So without the mushroom, this wood, the energy from the sun that went into making this wood just stays locked up and inaccessible to the rest of the ecosystem. But once you've got fungi digesting this for the rest of us, the mushroom is edible, and this kicks off the food chain from the wood. And yeah, so that's just hyphae coming off. And the other thing about that old 1950s thing about, the role of fungi is digesting the wood and keeping the forest tidy for the rest of us. The other thing is that, a lot of fungi are symbiotic with plants, where mycelium hooks onto the roots of plants. They gather about a third of the water for any plant. This is why when you transplant plants, they wilt, and you need to water them incredibly much because they're cut off from their network underground. And until they reestablish that, they won't be able to get enough water. And the fungi, the mycelium, which is a single cell thick, this gets a lot better penetration into the soil, a lot denser coverage. So they actually find most of the minerals that the plant needs. And in return, the plant usually shares with them about an eighth of their sugar that they produce. So it's this mutual relationship. So no, they're not out there just digesting the woods to keep our parks nice. They are nourishing every single plant that's out there, and the whole forest wouldn't be there without them. Okay, so this is that was our little presentation on hen of the woods. And I'm gonna do a little thing on honey mushrooms now. And Cecily, I want you to pay a special attention because I'm going to ask you questions afterwards. So, show all windows. There we go. So, uh, Cecily, can you answer some questions?
I'll try.
Okay, that's what we want. We want back and forth. We want interaction. Um, what makes this an oyster mushroom?
You mean, how do I know that's what it is?
Yeah.
Well, I can see the gills,
Mhm.
and I can tell they don't have much in the way of stems.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, if I saw that, I would be quite sure that it was an oyster, and I would cut it off and take it.
Cool. All right. Um, Let me just skip forward a little bit. What about this? Is is there a difference? What's going on?
Oh, well, the main difference there is the color. These are
Mm-hmm.
lighter,
Mm-hmm.
but I would call these oysters too.
Yeah. So we actually have three species of oysters that are good eating in this country. In North America, we have three, or I should say, three species of Pleurotus that are good eating, and two of them are all white and they come out in the summer. And one of them is Pleurotus populinus, so it's associated with the genus of tree Populus, which is our poplars and aspen and quaking aspen, I think, things like that. And but if you find a white oyster on a different kind of tree, like a maple or an oak, it's the other white oyster, which is pulmonarius. And so, like, I don't really care very much. So they're just summer oysters to me, but they're all white and they're a bit smaller and thinner. You know, the caps are not as thick, and so they're not as meaty in general. So our this is Austriatus, the one that's in your field guides. It's brown on top. It's not all white. When I started out, there was just the one species in the field guide. Um, you know, a lot of these older field guides, like the Audubon guide, they just call these things variable species. And now we know, okay, actually there are three or four or five or six in most cases. Um, but this is a different species from those white summer ones. So I thought, oh, it must be the cold and the wind in the fall that like toughens it up and makes it brown on top. But no, it's just a different species, and this is just the way it always grows. And yeah, so they're just they're physically thicker, and their texture is tougher. Which depending on what you like can be good or bad. This is a lovely collection in Switzerland that my columnist there, Jaco Stivier of blessed memory, sent me. And this is the woman who found them with her prize oysters. So yeah, oysters make us happy. You can see from the bark texture here that these are nothing like as big. And so the fall is a much better season for finding these sorts of mushrooms. Again, here they are. They're nice. They're lovely. They're just not very big. They're also tasty. And these are growing on, I don't know, looks like a birch, like a dark birch or something, or a cherry. Um, these Pleurotus species grow on hardwoods. This is your so-called angel wing. They used to be in Pleurotus. They've been separated out. If you find a white oyster on a conifer, you have an angel wing. And they pretty much fit the description of the summer oysters. They're white, they're not as substantial, but you know, they're still fine eating. But, and you know, I can look at these two pictures and say, okay, the stems are a little thinner here, you know, but really it's just very difficult to tell unless you know what the tree is. So those are your core oysters. And again, I'm going to start talking about lookalikes. And this is something I wanted to do in these Zoom talks because, you know, the first time someone asked me to do this sort of thing, I was kind of freaked because I'm happy to give a scientific talk over the air. If you're talking about eating things, it was very strange for me to not be able to point and quiz people and so on and make sure you know exactly what you're doing, because I don't want to point you in something's general direction and off you go and, you know, who knows what happens. So I wanted to explore this in a bit more depth. So, sorry, here are more angel wings. Again, they're on a conifer, they're all white. Okay, and so on the right here, we have Ostreatus, the oyster mushroom. Do you know what we have on the left here, Cecily?
Well, I would question whether that might be jack-o'-lanterns, but
Okay,
otherwise I clearly don't know.
okay. These are sometimes called late fall oysters. They're in a different genus now. They're green on the top. They're yellow on the gills, and there's this stripe here of yellow where something was shading them. You know, they're found in another month or so. I don't know what your schedule is there. And I forgot to mention this when I was talking about hen of the woods, is the first time I found them in New York, I found them on Labor Day and found them at different places in New York on Labor Day. And then I came out here and everyone's like, what? That's crazy talk. And, you know, they find them around now. And I've gone up to Michigan and found them in late September, early October. So I don't know what your schedule is for those. But these late fall oysters are one of the last mushrooms in the season, you know, where it's consistently cold even during the day. Oysters can do that too, and oysters have this oysters have two kind of strange winter habits. One is that they'll freeze solid on the tree and they'll be perfectly fine, and you'll get a thaw in, you know, for a couple of days in December for some strange reason, and, you know, out they come, they start growing again, they're perfectly happy. Or you don't need a thaw. My dad and I had a wonderful experience the day after New Year's one year, finding this oyster. We were visiting friends for New Year's Eve, and we noticed that her next door neighbor had a tree in their backyard, and there was an oyster on it about a foot across. And so we went and visited and told her about this oyster, and she said, why didn't you go grab it? And my dad was like, well, we weren't sure it was quite safe bopping around in someone else's backyard with a flashlight in the middle of the night. And we went the next day, and it was frozen solid on the tree, and we had to pick a rock and knock it off that way. But that's the sort of thing you'll encounter with this late fall oyster on the left here. They are more tough than regular oysters. Some people do not like them because they're so tough. Sometimes they are bitter. I have not eaten them. I have some friends who eat them, some who had a bad experience with bitterness and are like, I'm not going to waste the time on them again. So this late fall oyster, your other oysterish option. Here it is in close up on the tree, and actually, I'll point out also they don't really have much of a stem. You know, they're just sort of popping out of the tree. They've got a little bitty stubby stem. Your summer oysters, your angel wings, they definitely have some sort of stem. Your gills go down the stem. They follow the stem down, but they do have a stem. And yeah, you can kind of see stem underneath here and so on and so forth. And this is important because a lot of the lookalikes that you definitely don't want to eat do not have a stem. Do you know what this is, Cecily?
Yes, it's a crepe. And I know because I know what a crepe is, and also because I can see the title of your slide.
Aha. The title of the slide is diagnostic. But these are pictures from Darwin de Chazer in California. So Crepidotus, let's look underneath. They're a brown spore genus, and they're very small. You can see the grain of the wood here. They get bigger than this. But you can also see that the gills are starting to turn brown here from the spores. And what else was I going to say? Yeah, they're just small. Oh, here's more. This was not. Okay, so they're just stuck in the middle of these other, these are white summer oysters, definite stem, also fairly small. And you can get these in quantity. So, you know, I'm not an Austriatus snob here, where, you know, just don't pay attention to those other things. The crepes are not known to be poisonous, and, you know, we probably would know by now, but, you know, they're also really tiny. Again, you can see the grain of the wood and the dirt that's on the wood here. They're usually like half an inch across. If you've got one that's 2 inches, it's a giant. So they're not terribly attractive to collect. What would you say this is, Cecily?
Well, without being able to see underneath, well, I would guess it's an oyster.
That's exactly kind of what we want to do here. You know, we want to know when we need more information. I think this does have a stem, so it's one of these oysters, and the bark kind of looks like a conifer. So I would guess that these are angel wings, but we would need to check those sorts of things. This is the slide I thought we were going to get. You can see the slide. You can see the title on top.
Yes.
So the slide is calling this angel wings. That was the old name for angel wings. The species name is Porigens before they got put in their own genus. But there are counterindications. What are you seeing here that says this might not be angel wings?
Well, I don't think I'm seeing stems.
That's correct. Yeah, and also if you look at the size, there's this moss up here, and these are really tiny. So we've got this is sometimes called the point of attachment instead of a stem. We've got gills radiating from the point of attachment, but we don't have a real stem, and these are really tiny. So these are just Crepidotus, and they're just so young that the gills haven't started to turn brown yet. But as you can see from the title, these some of these slides are this is a 1970s slide from a and the IDs were done by someone who was a lecturer at the New York Botanical Gardens. So we just didn't have a lot of institutional knowledge about a lot of things that are fairly fundamental now. So, you know, every once in a while people will complain about, oh, there are so many names and all things have gotten so complicated. And it's like, yeah, well, things used to be a lot simpler because they were wrong and because people just didn't know what they were doing. So, yeah, mushrooms are complicated. We have about 12,000 named species in North America. That's 100 times, no, okay, that's about a bit over 10 times as many birds as there are total. And um, the general opinion of people who work on this is that we've named 5 to 10% of what is actually out there. So, you know, really there are something like 100,000 different mushrooms in North America. And they're not all present in your area. And most of the common ones in your area are named, or if they're not named, they look exactly like something because DNA is teaching us that we often have things that look pretty much the same but are not the same. But, you know, there's a lot of things out there, even with names, and there is even more that does not have names. So yeah, it's just a tough field. There's a lot of stuff here. Let's see what we got next. We're in the quiz portion of this. So what do you have here? What are you seeing here?
Well, I'm seeing caps. I'm not seeing stems.
Correct.
And I'm actually not seeing gills yet, but it'd
Right.
be easy enough to look.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say that there are gills here.
Mhm.
But you have a dilemma. So the caps are brown. So if it's an oyster, it is Austriatus. So it should be, if it is Austriatus, it should also be really pretty big.
Yes.
And so as you can see, this slide is labeled Pleurotus austriatus. It is from the 70s. But I'm not seeing any stems either. And they're not, you know, this is a lichen on the tree with it. They're not much bigger than the lichen. So my take on it is this is probably another Crepidotus. So, you know, watch out for what you're doing out there, people. You know, one of the nice things about these, you know, these edibles is a lot of times the edibles are just really big. That's a big part of how they got to be edibles, because people see big mushrooms and they eat them. That's also why, you know, your green sport lepiota got to be the #1 poisoner in North America, because it's really big and it comes out on people's lawns. So it's right there and it's big and beautiful. But a lot of these small things are just not what you want to find. Okay, what about this? What are we going to say about this?
Well, I would guess that's an oyster, but again, I'd flip it up and cut it off and see what I got.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've got a stem at the top middle here. And these are all white. So which kind of oyster are they?
Well, it's summer, depending on what kind of tree it's on.
Yes. Very good. You're making me feel like I'm making progress here. Let's go on. Oh, there is something else I wanted to show you for lookalikes, which I had forgotten about, but we will go there now. So, wait, what's going on here? I hit the wrong thing. Okay. And there we go. Okay. Are you familiar with these mushrooms?
No, no, I don't know that one.
Okay. So, you can see why someone who's out looking for oysters, and this isn't for them, you know, someone might see these and go, hey, maybe these are oysters. They have the worst name in all of my concern, this hypsizygous thing. And we have two species. One is Olmerius, and the other one is Tessellatus. And Gary is saying, this is Gary's site again. He's saying these are all Olmerius. They grow on elm trees, box elder, things like that. And would you think these are oysters? Would you not? How would you explain to someone that
I would not think they're oysters because oysters have a really short, almost non-existent stem that connects directly to the wood, not an actual stem like these have.
Yeah, these have a real substantial, normal looking stem. These are sometimes called elm oysters, though. They're not closely related to oysters. They, yeah. The first time I found them, some were coming up straight from a tree, and I thought they were one of these white Lactarius or Russellas because they've got such a real stem on them. They are edible. They don't have much flavor to them. They're really crunchy. They have a really like carrot-like texture. So between that and them, you know, not really taking up flavor very well, I don't really care for them. But, you know, they are going to be out now. Some people may like them. I thought I'd bring them up. It's not a given that you just immediately see them and say, okay, those aren't oysters, and you might want to know what they are. What do we have? Whoops. What do we have here? Sorry that I was trying to click past the Zoom bar and it stopped sharing, tragically. Okay. What about these?
I don't think I've ever seen those.
Okay, so these are another oyster, and I'm gonna try and snag, okay, this is another oyster. I'm sorry, they're Pleurotus. They have a real stem on them.
Yes.
They get furry like this. You know, he's right where you are, and where you are is right on the cusp of the trade-off in range between these two species. This is Pleurotus levis, and this is Pleurotus dryanus, the oak oyster. And they're both quite tough. He has found specimens that look very different from each other, but most of the time, I would say, you cannot tell the difference by looking at them. And most of the time, the only way you can tell the difference is by range. Otherwise, there's DNA, and they look very different if you culture them in a Petri dish, but live, they can be absolutely identical. Now, he has emphasized that these have a partial veil, so you end up with a ring on the stalk sometimes, and you can end up with remnants of the veil hanging from the stalk, hanging from the edge of the cap. And like down here, you can see there's sort of a ring, and there are these little fragments hanging. But this happens in both species. And also both species will turn yellow in age or when you bruise them. You can see these are starting to turn yellow here. Often they'll be very helpful in identifying them, and they'll get all fuzzy. You see the stem here?
Yep.
The stem will get fuzzy, the top of the cap will get fuzzy, and they'll get yellowish. And you'll pick these nice white smooth things, and you won't know what they are. And by the time you get home, the stem will be all fuzzy, and the fuzz will be yellow. And these are also edible, but they're also very tough. So you don't, no one that I know collects them for food. But they've got, some stem, they've got the gills that go down the stem a little bit. And, people might make the mistake. And these will get really huge is another thing. He doesn't really have a picture of that, but you can sort of tell down here at the left. You can also see that the picture is by John Plischke, so, they occur in your area. And there's one last lookalike that I wanted to mention, which is this. And how would you go about thinking about what this is?
Well, I would say it doesn't have a stem, so I would not assume it's an oyster.
That's correct. This is Lentinellus. We've got a couple of species. They all kind of look like this. They actually have black fur on the cap. This is not just coloration that you're seeing in the middle of the cap here. This is actually black fur. And I am truly embarrassed to say this, but in my very early days of collecting, I went out with my dad. We weren't finding much. We found these things, and I sort of knew that the black fuzz should not be there. So I said, okay, people do all sorts of crazy things when they're mushroom hunting, because it's like you're out, you're finding food in the wild, it's this exciting thing. And I've, made fun of people for what they do. And this is something that I did. I knew the black fuzz should not be there. So I decided that it was a mold and we could just scrape it off and eat the oysters. And it is not a mold, and you should not ever eat moldy mushrooms in the first place, any more than you'd eat a moldy zucchini or broccoli or whatever. But if you see and as you can see, they don't have a stem. And the other sort of clincher for these things, you can impress your friends with your knowledge, their gills are serrated. Oysters have these beautiful, smooth, flowing curve to the gills. Lentinellus does not. They are actually biologically polypores. So it's like they didn't really even out this dimension of spreading out from the gills. It's like they're dipping where the pores should be. I don't know. This is just a thing for me to remember it by. But they have these serrated gills. So if you're out with friends and you see this and they think it might be oysters, you can go, no, I will prove this. We will turn it over and the gills will be serrated. So, and they'll go, whoa, Cecily, you know so much about mushrooms. This is amazing. So let's resume our quiz here. Okay, so we had some sort of oyster mushroom here, summer oyster. This is This is sort of starting to turn brown on top, so it might be Ostreatus, and they're also pretty big and meaty looking. I don't know. Do they look meaty to you, or am I just projecting? Because
Oh, I think they look good. I would take those.
okay, okay. Let's see what's up next. Okay, so what? Tell me how you worked through what this is.
Well, I mean, besides looking at what it's called, it has a stem, so it's not an oyster.
Exactly. It's not one of our, well, it has a big stem, so it's not one of our eating oysters.
Right.
So your question is this one of those big, tough, furry, yellowing ones, or is it the elm oyster, which is smooth all over, but also has a substantial stem?
Well,
Because it's not easy.
no, oh, well, I don't see, I can't tell if it's turning yellow. It doesn't look terribly furry.
Well, one of the let's blow it up a little bit.
Yeah, I still don't think that looks furry, but I don't know what kind of tree it's on.
Yeah. Okay, so now that I did not notice this at first. Now that I've blown it up, I'm seeing a little ring here.
Mm-hmm.
So that would indicate it's one of those oysters. And the gills are actually going down the stem. So I do think it's one of these. Let's review again. So, oh goodness. Okay.
Not that one. No, because it had a stem.
This is
That
our
one.
oyster.
Maybe that one.
Right. It's got the little ring. It's a little furry. This is the elm oyster. They're really smooth. Look at that stem. It's just really smooth. There's no gill, and the gills don't go down the stem.
Right.
So that right, they're just flat. They're not decurrent at all. So that other thing we're looking at is looking like one of those oysters. And right. And like you said, you can see the caption says Pleurotus dryanus. So the idea on this was that northern oak oyster. What about this one?
Well, it's not an oyster because it's got a big stem, but
Not the eating oyster. Yeah.
right. Well, let's see. The gills don't look like they're running down the stem.
Correct. I agree. So that would make it the elm oyster, the hypsozygus. And the stem is nice and smooth. You can see these lines going down in. So this is looking like an elm oyster. What about this?
Well,
how would you react if you found this?
Well, my first thought is that it's reminding me of the split gill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Except not nearly as pretty.
So here's another photo of it. Same thing.
Yeah, again, I can see the name, and this is one that I just found myself this year, and they're small and black.
Yep. Yeah. So first of all, they're black, which sort of disqualifies them from being edible or one of these edibles. Yeah, it's a genus Resupinatus, which is found on the underside of wood. So they don't have, well, you can see they have a point of attachment, and then the gills radiate from that. But the point of attachment is in the middle of the cap, because these are growing on the bottom of a log, and they're just attached in the middle of the cap, and they grow out from the middle of the cap. So this is just its own weird thing. You know, basically we go, okay, this is not, whatever it may be, it is not one of our known edibles. So we're not going to touch it for that. They're also really tiny. You can see from the moss here, these are only a quarter inch, half an inch across. So it's, you can see a little one here just starting to grow, but, and these got confused with each other. So this is just something that is not in the repertoire altogether. And it's good to be able to just toss those out when you find something that doesn't match and not feel, okay, I have to match this to something that I know and decide what it is. And, you know, and force yourself to think, oh, I must eat this, or maybe not eat this, or, you know, just leave it out. Okay, what do you do when you see this?
Um,
What do you think? What do you do?
okay, I think it doesn't have a stem and I'm not going to eat it.
Okay, and how can we check?
Oh, I'll turn it over, pull one off.
Okay, we turn it over. What are we seeing?
Oh, serrated gills.
Yep, yep. You get to be a genius and tell them all about the serrated gills and how this is Lentinellus, and, you know, biologically it's a polypore. So, you know, that's why you come to this talk, right? So you can
Right.
make friends as well as find the edibles. Okay, what about this?
Oh, that's pretty.
Yeah.
Well, I guess from the picture, that's very small. And I don't know what that is.
Okay, this is a Crepidotus.
Oh,
This is, you know, brown cap. It doesn't have a stem. It's just radiating there. I might have an undershot. Oh, never mind. Okay. Yeah, but it's just radiating from this little point of attachment. They're very small. Yeah, it's a Crepidotus. And for, you know, you pot hunters out there, if it's not big, you're not going to eat it anyway. So, you know, none of the good edibles are tiny, so you don't care. And this, I think this is our last slide. What's your thought process?
well, it does not look like one of those eating oysters.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what are you looking at? What are you
Well, it's the way the gills stop when they get to the stem. It's the
Yeah. Yeah, this was placed in Panellus for a while. If you know Panellus stypticus, this kind of has the proportions, even though it's like 10 or 15 times as big. This is that late fall oyster. So the tops aren't particularly greenish here. They're a little purple, which happens sometimes. You can see them going back between. I think I mentioned when we first saw the late fall oysters, they'll be yellowish where they don't get sunlight. And you can see that on the left side. This mushroom in the middle is shading the ones underneath it, and they're sort of yellowish where they're underneath it. But this sort of purplish color is also something they do. The greenish olive that's in there, all this is the late fall oyster. So yeah, this is so this is, yes, this is my last slide. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So I hope this gives you some additional preparation for, you know, hitting the woods. I don't know how your season progresses in terms of matching up with the calendar months. You know, it's just started to get chilly sometime here. And so we, why is this one? Oysters may be coming out soon, the real oysters, the fall oysters. We won't get the late fall oysters late fall oysters for another month or so. We should be getting the hypsozygus and so on also, but we don't particularly care. How are we doing on time?
Well, I think we've been going for quite a while. What we can do is we can invite people to ask you additional questions during the Zoom meeting.
Let me answer the other questions that you submitted, and I'll also just do a little bolete thing quickly, because I remember your talk in August was on boletes, and he's very good with boletes, and I'm sure he covered a lot. Now, and I just wanted to say one thing. I just wanted to say one thing before, just specifically about edibility of boletes. For fall boletes, what we're looking for is this. It's the edulous. There's this, nice toasty brown hamburger bun kind of cap. Usually has a fat stem. The stem has these little tiny craters on it that we call reticulations. And I'm going to sort of assume that most of you know what these look like. We have, and I'm not going to cover other eating, the summer is filled with these red and yellow boletes, and they're very hard to tell apart, and some of them are fairly reliable edibles and some of them are not, and but they're more summer mushrooms, so at this point I'm just going to let them go by. We can also find these Tylopolis species, which are more or less colored like this one. They're more likely to have a brown stem, and you can recognize them as boletes. You can see this sort of coloration. Some of the Tylopolis are just stunningly bitter, and that's where the new people in the club come in handy, because you can say, here, taste this mushroom and spit it out if it's bitter, and then they get mad at you and don't come back. But this is a very good one. This is very tasty. If you taste the Tylopolis and they're not bitter, then, go for it, because they're just very good. Some of the nice ones are a little purplish on the cap, but we also have some bitter ones that have varying degrees of purplish. And, again, you can taste them. You're not going to eat the wrong thing, because you won't be able to, because they just taste so horrible. But as far as things that do taste good but might mess you up, I don't know if he covered Boletus huronensis last month. This is as you can see, it also looks kind of like the boletes you want to eat. It can be really massive, as I think, the small one is a normal size mushroom. I have a photo of me somewhere holding one of these things, and it's like a quarter the size of my torso. They can get really huge. They're very dense and heavy, and they do reliably make people sick. They taste quite good. As you can see, Bill, who found this is Bill Bacchitis' article at the fungikingdom.net site. He's dressed it for, he's cut away the messy bits so that he could bring it home for cooking. But it stains blue very slightly. It has yellow pores, even when it's quite young. If it looks too good to be true, it might be too good to be true, is kind of your little rule here. Again, it gets really yellow, and you know it. One of the heartbreaking things about hunting mushrooms is, you know, if your bolete is nice and solid and not tunneled at all, that might be because it's ridiculously bitter or otherwise toxic. So, and you know, you find them, they're big and huge and solid and pristine, and okay, this has a few tunnels in it, but you know, that looks lovely and exactly like something you'd get excited about eating. But again, it blues slightly and some often slowly, and it grows with hemlock. These boletes are all associated with trees symbiotically, like I showed you that one slide of the roots underground. So this, if you don't know what hemlock is, it's this tree with the short little needles like you're seeing in the middle here. And it does not have reticulation. So it looks a lot like an edulis, but the stem does not have reticulation. So I just wanted to issue a little alert, a little caution there, and give a little shout out to Boletus huronensis. Now, you just had the two questions left. You asked about the here we go. What happens if you find a hen of the woods that's pale? And you know, I said the one on the left probably just hasn't gotten enough sunlight, so it's not tanned like the one on the right. Yeah, and like I said, they tan, they produce melanin just the way we do. They also produce vitamin D, and that's one of the biological process that predates the split between animals and fungi. So it's an ancient thing. It's one that we share with them, our joint heritage. You found some lovely jack-o'-lanterns and asked if I've seen them glow in the dark. I have not, but I do have friends who have seen them glow in the dark. And lately, there have been a couple of people that I know through Facebook who have gone out on midnight forays and just stumbled around the woods in the middle of the night looking for things that glow. And Anellus stypticus has been the top culprit. But this can be very strong. Again, John Dank, he had a friend who, I don't know if he was specifically taking out a tree in the backyard, taking out a stump, or whether he's just excavating. And it got to be late in the day, and the people were like, "Hey, this stump is glowing. Let's call John and make sure, you know, we have a mushroom and not an alien here." And he was like, "Oh wow, that's so cool!" And he, you know, took all these pictures of it, which I was not able to find in the morning before the talk. And okay, so yes, these are American parasols, and they are what you mostly see in the books. This is another one where there are definitely more than one species, and there's one that's named, I think, from Hawaii. And most of ours behave more like that species than the original one. So what most of your books will say is that this turns maroon, or dark red. So the color that's in the center of the cap, this brownish red maroon, they'll get this way when they get older. You see on the lower right here, it's bruised, that maroon here, from where it was picked. What most of the books don't say is that it turns yellow first, and then this darkens to maroon. So I don't know how this got left out or what's going on with that, but you can see there's lots of yellow staining on the stem. And even these scales here on the right where it's, started to get bruised, these are yellow. They're just yellow. They're on their way to becoming maroon, but right now they're just yellow. And what you said is you had it in the fridge, and you got this colored guttation, where there were drops coming off of it, and I think you said they were yellow and then they turn maroon, and that's just the same chemical.
Good.
There's nothing bad about that.
Yeah, I just picked these this morning, and from a patch where we picked them many times, but they've never been yellow like this, and they were just dripping this yellow fluid. So I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything funny going on.
Yeah, they should be fine. I mean, if there's nothing else, I mean, they're just getting a lot. You can get this if they just are getting a lot of moisture from the ground. They're sucking it up. It's going right on through them. They're just happy mushrooms.
Yeah, I think they're very young. Plus, the guy who owns the property also has a built-in sprinkler, so he does have a lot of moisture.
Yeah, so that can definitely cause that situation. So yeah, go for it. They're very good. The taste kind of reminds me of lobster on these things. Is that your experience, or?
Well, I never thought of lobster, but what I really like about them is if you can find a lot, then you can dry the caps. You can put them in a jar like Pringles, and then all year long during the off season, you can just open it up and sniff it and drop some of the caps into your dinner, and it's kind of nice until spring comes.
Yeah. Yes. Wonderful stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining us. Everyone who's a member received an email on September 7th telling you how to join the members-only Zoom meeting, and that'll start shortly, and Leon can take some more questions. So thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.